YouTube, Rain here, and going over this video series of LSV's reviews and how well I can get in terms of how close I think the cards are to what his reviews are. This one will be Sultai and Black, so that's the blue, green, black clan, as well as all the black cards. So getting right into it, Abomination of Gadul. This card is great. It flips up for 5 as a flyer that's attacking for 3 and letting you draw and discard a card. So loot is the term used. This is a very solid 3-0, and it's on the upside of that. It's a very, very big accreditation to its clan that it's only a common. Yep. Death Frenzy. 5 mana, so that's 3 black, green. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. Creature dies this turn, you gain 1 life. This is great against the Mardu decks. It's great against morph creatures. You can save this card until it hurts your opponent more than it hurts you, or you can just set it up so that it will be that way. The upside of gaining some life is really great against aggressive decks, and if your opponent just blew you out with prowess and some sort of aggressive Jeskai deck, this can be great too. So in controlling and mid-range decks, this card is phenomenal. In more aggressive decks, it's not as good, but typically if you're paying 5 mana for this effect and you're playing black and green, your options really are like Sultai and Abzan, and those are the slowest clans, so it just fits right in. 3.5, I'm gonna say. Oh, cool. As I said, I haven't actually seen these pages, so I'm not just like cheating in terms of rating these. It's fun for me too to see the comparison that he has to what I say. Karu Lichlord, 6 mana for a 4/4 is a little costly. You're paying 2 extra mana for this ability. This ability, it says return a random creature from your graveyard to the battlefield, gains flying, trample, and haste, and you get to in the exiles. Has a bit of counter synergy with Delve, but I'm a pretty big fan of just the damage he can force through in a game. I would say he's a 3/5, just because if you slow down the game, you can get a lot of value out of him. He might be a 3/0, but I would give him a 3/5. Okay. It has a bit of anti-synergy with Delve, and it is a 6 mana 4/4. But good card. Good card. Rakshasa Death Dealer. Black and a green. Black and a green, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Black and a green, regenerate. I was harsher on this card than I should have been when I first saw it, simply because I assumed this ability couldn't be activated multiple times in a turn. This is the sort of card where if you see it, and you're playing black and green, you're pretty happy to play it, and it will encourage you to stay in 3 colors because you want to play as many swamps and forests as you can to get as many activations off of this in a long game. Like 6 mana to make this a 6/6 that can regenerate just means that it's very hard to attack into, and it's very hard to block if you want to. The thing is, it's not that great at attacking, because unless you just have the mana to spare, this sort of effect helps you force through the base damage, and 2 isn't amazing. But he should be able to get through the first few turns. Yeah, 3/5. I think it's better than Karu Lichlord. 4/0. Okay. I put him into 3/5 just because of his needing to be pumped to be good as an aggressive creature, but I suppose black-green fits in pretty well with it. I'm still going to keep the 3/5. I will go to 3/0 for this one though. Vizier, you're paying 5 mana for a 4/4, which is average. And if you exile cards, you make him bigger, but that isn't really important. He doesn't have trample by himself, and he just 3 3-0. I would say this is about as good as Karu. And in some decks it can be better, but in a lot of decks it's going to be worse. Secret Plans, 0.5. You can't reliably get this before you've unmorphed your guys. If you do play this on turn 2 and morph a guy on turn 3, then whoop-de-doo, this replaced itself and did an irrelevant thing in the game. You need to get 2 morph guys flipping up for this to be good, and you need to have this down before you flip those 2 morph guys up for this to be good. 0.5, very easily. And no, I'm sticking to my this card is terrible. Sidisi, like pretty much the definition of a higher end 3.5. A 4 mana 3/3. This is a little below the curve on a tricolor card. Even though 4 mana for 3/3 is what you expect, that's usually for monocolored. When she enters the battlefield or attacks, you get to basically enable playing a delve card, since most delve cards are about 3. And the upside of putting in black zombies when you send creatures to your graveyard is really her strongest ability. So I could see this making her a 4/0, but I'm just not a big fan of the rest of the card, so I'm giving her a 3/5. Okay. I mean, she is a very good deal. Oh, Sultai Ascendancy. This card is great. Normally, if it's just a card that will give you selection once, that's not very good. However, this has the versatility of allowing you to choose how much you want to enable delve versus what you want to draw, and over the course of 3 turns, this card is just going to set you up very, very well. It's like if you ever played Prognostic Sphinx in Theros block, being able to scry 3 every turn was just great. Playing with Thassa is kind of similar. These aren't cards that get you value in the first few turns, but over the course of a game, certainly. 3/5. Yep. Sultai Charm. A lot of people will say this is the worst charm. I kind of see what they mean, but every deck's going to have monocolor creatures, so you're playing this. And every deck, well, a few decks will have artifacts or enchantments you want to get rid of, like Ghostfire Blade or Ascendancies that you just don't want to lose to. So this should have some advantage there. And the offset of just getting some card selection, because you're drawing 2 cards, spending a card to play this, and discarding a card. So that's like drawing 2, discarding 2. So getting some nice selection for your hand is an okay third ability. This isn't the best charm by nearly as much as like anything else, but it's still very playable. I'll give it a 3/0 though. No, I'm sticking to my 3/0. I think it's just that much worse than most of the other charms. Sultai Soothsayer. This is like a 3/5 if I ever saw one. 5 mana, 2/5. That draws you a specific card you get to choose and enables Delve. This card is great. Fantastic. Like in any deck, this card is great. Yep. That's a bit of a stretch, but in the best case scenario, that is kind of what it is. Villainous Wealth 1.0. I've had a very, very, very long talk about this card. You don't know what their curve is, so you don't know how to be efficient with this. You don't know what they have to get you out of the situation they're in. This costs a lot, and there isn't a lot of ramp in this format, which ramp makes Genesis Wave good, in addition to playing with a deck that makes Genesis Wave good. And your opponent might just be playing an aggressive deck and you're like, oh, I villainous wealth for like 5 and you get like 2/2s and you. I don't think there's any really great time for this. Black. It's time for the black cards. Bellowing, Bellowing Saddleroot. A 4-mana 4/5. Jeez. Okay, what's the downside? If you didn't attack with a creature, he swings at you once. In aggressive decks, this card is bonkers. Nothing's going to be bigger than a 4-mana 4/5. Even if it hits you once. In aggressive decks, that's less relevant because life total shouldn't matter. Your opponent's life total is what you're trying to get to 0. In defensive decks, if you have flyers or ways to get through this raid without losing value, this card goes up in value a bit, but it's a lot worse in controlling decks that just want to stabilize. He should prevent more damage than he does to you, though, so he'll be great regardless. I'll give him a 3/0. Yep. Very creature-like defensive deck. Yep, that's the worst case scenario. Bitter Revelation. It enables Delve. It scries you 4, so it looks at your top 4 cards. You get to select which 2 of them will give you value, and you get to use the other 2 as Delve cards. In a slow format, this card is pretty good, but it is a little slow in its sorcery speed. I'm going to give this a 2/0. That's about the level I rate this at. It makes the cut about half the time. I mean, yeah, this is a very powerful card. I just don't like how slow it is. I don't like sorceries. Bloodsoaked Champion, 1.0, maybe a 2.0. Okay, I'll give it a 2.0, simply because there are some aggressive decks that'll want this. But can't block is important in Limited. Bringing it back isn't really relevant at a lot of points in the game. So you're forcing through 4 damage before you just can't do anything with this card anymore. And that's just not worth a card. Oh my god. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't like this card. I'm sticking to my 2/0. Dead Drop. This card has impressed me. You play cheap removal, it helps enable this. Also, you play cheap removal to get into the late game, which helps enable this. It is a bit more reliant on Delve than a lot of other Delve cards, but geez, what a good card. In the right deck, this is definitely a 3/5. In the wrong deck, it's a 3/0, maybe even a 2/5. And if you're aggressive, this is just unplayable. Given its power in control decks, and the fact that you rated something like Bitter Revelation at 3/0, I would say I would give this a 3/5. Nah. Control decks, this card is so powerful. Debilitating Injury. Speaking of cheap removal that enables Dead Drop, this kills a morph guy, but you don't know what you're getting a lot of the time. Most of the time they're mid-range guys that you'd want to be killing anyway, and it does it pretty cheaply. Worst case scenario, you can use it as a combat trick. At the end of combat, you kill their guy, and if you really need to. So, not premium removal, but either 2.5 or 3.0, somewhere between there. Despise. I despise these cards in Limited. 2.0. It's very powerful on the first few turns, but does nothing later. Absolutely nothing. Yep. Disowned excuse me, Disowned Ancestor. It's a warrior, which is nice. It's a 0/4 for 1, which stops the aggressive deck so well. It has Outlast, so yes, turn 1 this, turn 2 make it a 1/5 with a +1/+1 counter for like Death Touch or Reach or some other crap later on. This card is great and has been very, very thoroughly good. 3.0. Yep. Dutiful Return. In the Sultai decks that run a lot of self-null, this can enable you to play some of those enablers. This can help you play some of those enablers because you'll get value out of those enablers that would normally not get you value because you can just bring back your creatures. So in the right Sultai control deck, this can be a good player. I wouldn't play more than 2 in that deck. Probably 1 is very good though. In non-Sultai control, this card is pretty miserable. 2.0. Yeah, when it's good, it's really good, which is why I bumped it to a 2.0. Empty the Pits, 0.0. Inefficient, so hard to cast with 4 black in a tricolor set. Just awful, miserable, don't ever play it. Ugh. No. You're not paying 6 mana for 4 zombies. You're paying 6 mana and 4 exile cards, which is expensive. Makes your other delve cards worse. Ugh. So hard to cast. So hard to use. Puts the zombies in tapped. I hate this card. This isn't a 2.0. By no means. Grim Haruspex. It's a morph guy, cheap flip up cost, and whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you get to draw a card. If you flip this up at the right time, you could be drawing 3 cards off your 3/2 for 3. That said, a 3/2 body isn't great. I've talked about it many, many times. Morph creatures and 2-power bears are in this format pretty frequently, so it's just going to trade, and it doesn't draw a card for itself, which would make this card really great. I'll give it a 2/5. I'm usually not cutting it. 3/5. Yeah, no deck's gonna leave it in the sideboard, but that's why I gave it a 2/5, because I'm like 90% playing it. Maybe a 3/0. I think 3/5 is just overrated for this body. Gurmang Swiftwing. 2 mana, 1 power, flying, first strike, haste. Also has 2 toughness. This is the sort of card you want to play in a deck that can give 1/1 counters to this, as flying and first strike scale absurdly well with +1/+1 counters. On his own, he's not great, but he's okay. He can force Wind Scouts to have a trick or kill them. He can eat Watcher of the Roost. But when you get 1/1/1 counter on this guy, this turns it from like a bad 2-drop to what would be a great 4-drop. Yeah, you're not playing this for raid though. Yeah, there's no big aura theme, but there are a lot of Abzan cards that can put counters on this, like Feed of Resistance, blow out some flyers, make this guy permanently great. High Sentinels, Dragon Scale Boon. I think this card has a lot of potential in Abzan and he's not giving it credit for it. Just keep in mind the amount of ways you have to put +1/+1 counters on any guy. But if you have enough, this guy should be great. If you don't, he's absolutely unplayable, I agree. Karu Bloodsucker. In a long attrition game, this guy is going to be pretty good. He does occupy the same slot as a morph, but he also gets some value out of your creatures that are going to die, so you can like block with a token, sacrifice your token, make him bigger. They use removal on your bigger creature. Sacrifice your bigger creature in response, make him bigger, and drain them for 2. In the right deck, he can be good, and there are a lot of right decks for this card. Give it a 2-0 or a 2-5 though. I'll stick with 2-0. This card is awful. 5 mana defenders that aren't even very efficiently costed, and irrelevant upside. 1.0 if you're really, really needing creatures, maybe. Krumar Bondkin, this has been along the below average in the morph cards. It's a warrior, so that's something to note. This guy is great with Chief of the Scale, making him a 5/4. But he's pretty filler, 2.0. Yeah. Skull Hunter, coming in tapped is important in the late game, as he cannot pluck. I know he's talking about how there's a lot of morph in this format, so bears are going to be great, but oftentimes you're playing this on turn 2 as the best case scenario. You won't have a 1-drop, and he's not going to get his raid off, and you're just paying 2 mana for a 2/1 that comes into play tapped. 1.0. Oh my god. This isn't an easy 2-for-1. Why is this an easy 2-for-1? If you attack with something, make them discard a card and play him. Usually that's around the time where 2/1 is irrelevant. They can just eat this guy for days, and you won't get value for this creature. He drops in turn 2, he doesn't get his raid off, so you're just paying 2 mana for a worse bear. Ugh, no, this is wrong. Rarely will I say that there is no justification for a rating here, but this is absolutely unjustified. Murek Nightblade, 4 mana for a 2/3 is fine in a format with a lot of 2-power guys and a lot of morph creatures. Has a cheap Outlast, it gives all your Outlast creatures Death Touch. I love this card. Death Touch on your guys that are trying to make it into the late game is pretty great, like Salt Road Patrol, the 2/5 for 4, Outlast it once, it's a 3/6 Death Touch for 4, just kills everything it blocks and lives. So this is just really inclined towards Absent decks already. There's a bit of anti-synergy where if you Outlast this guy to give him Death Touch, it'll take an extra turn before you can block with your guys that you Outlast, but 3.0. Yeah, creatures you don't want to be removed mid-combat, same with the Falconer, but that just entails how good the effect is. Yep. Molding Snakeskin, 0.5. Auras, not great. Effect, not great. Regenerate for expensive costs, awful. Well, probably the best part of this card, but it's still not great. Finally an unplayable, and you call Mardu Skull Hunter. Very good. Ugh. Absolutely not. Murderous Cut. This is the best Delve card in the set, maybe second best. 5 mana for destroy target creature at instant speed in a slow format is already great. Giving it Delve just makes it have an upside. 3.5 on the upper end of that. Necropolis Fiend, if there's one card that would be better than Murderous Cut that has Delve on it, it would be Necropolis Fiend. 4/5 flyers great at any point in the game. Having Delve means that you can cast him efficiently at, you want to cast him at like 6 mana, hopefully. So that's 3 cards exile, that's average. But the effect of using your 4/5 flyer, which is great for removal as well, insane. 4.5. If the game goes long, it's very, very, very hard to beat this. I think it is either on the upper end of 4.0 or the lower end of 4.5. Raider Spoils. This was a card I was convinced for the longest time was bad, but there's actually a deck for it. So 1.5. Rakshasa Secret, purely a sideboard card. I mean, it helps enable Delve, and it's technically a 2-for-1, but they get to choose what they discard, and there are times in the game where this does nothing, particularly if you draw it late, like the discard cards that you get to go looking in their hand. 1.5. Eh. He might be right here. This might actually just be a main deck card, but I'm not the biggest fan. I played against this card. You're taking away value from your creatures to kill their creatures, which would normally be fine, but the amount of time it takes to get this card rolling is too long. Outlast is already a really slow mechanic, which is the majority of the way you get +1/+1 counters on creatures, and taking a very slow mechanic saying, hey, if we be even slower, we can play this card. Just not a great plan. 2.0 though. Yep. Rite of the Serpent, it's slow but you'll play it. It has some marginal upside. 3.0. Rotting Mastodon, pretty good against aggressive decks. Not really a aggressive card though. 1.5. Yeah, it doesn't even have Morph. There are so many better options. Yep. Ruthless Ripper, 3.5 easily. Oh, shit. This card comes down turn 1 as a Typhoid Rats at worst. At best, it's impossible to play around this. Just black decks that have a Morph creature, suddenly free flip up Morph, kill your guy. Ugh, this card is bonkers, and making them lose 2 life is a nice upside. It might be the best upside on one of these. This is definitely the best card in the cycle, and I'm super excited to play it. Yep. Shambling Attendants. This card has been pretty good. It's a very good blocker. And it makes the cut a good portion of the time, even if it's very slow. 3.0. Yeah, you know what I was talking about with the 1 to 2 slots for expensive delve cards for this, like, for my first, like, 10 videos. Like, I've been talking about this, and this isn't really the best one to play. Yep, generally what I've said about this card. Sidisi's Pet should be fine against aggressive decks, but really underwhelming as a whole card. 1.5. I find it surprising that he gave this a 3.0, but he gave the 1/5 flyer that flips up for 4 like a 2.0, or no, he gave it a 1.5. I like that card more than this one. I think it has more relevant upsides. It's a warrior, it flies. That's better than lifelink in my eyes, especially on a defensive creature. I'm just really not a fan of this card. I'm much more of a fan of the 1/5 flyer. I think it is terrible. Pretty miserable. Scavenger. 5 mana for a 3/3 flyer is what you want to pay, and it's a good card to play. That's only one card exiled, so this should make the cut pretty much every time. Actually, every time. Somewhere between 2.5 and 3.0 for this card. 3.5. Yeah, this card is great, but 3.5 is pushing it. I'll definitely give it a solid 3.0. Swarm of Bloodflies. This card is very slow. This is a slow format, but this card might even just be too slow for this format. From what I've experienced, it kind of is. 2.0, it makes the cut sometimes, but not most of the time. Throttle, this is slow, but it's removal, so you're playing it. 3.0. Unyielding Kumar, this has impressed me. A 4 mana 3/3 that's amazingly hard to block or attack into. It's a warrior as well, that's pretty cool. 3.0, this card has been great for me. Oh. Yeah. Guess I was underrating this card, and how much better it was than I thought it would be just made me rate this card up. But yeah, it is a 2.5. Alright, top 5 black commons. Throttle's probably there. Let me make a note. Oh. I can do English. Oh. Sultai Scavenger is on that list. Absolutely. Oh, Ripper. I love that. Right of the Serpent might be. This might be the first list that will be different from his Disowned Ancestor. Because he might put Mardu Skull Hunter on that, and I think that's absolutely wrong. Debilitating Injury. Oh. See if there's any other options for this list. Bitter Revelation. Which one doesn't make the cut? Is it right or is it injury? I like right more than injury, simply because it's unconditional and can deal with bombs, even if it's much, much slower. So I'm cutting injury from the list. For me, number 5 goes to the Scavenger. He probably doesn't have that as number 5, but I think it's a very, very, very solid card, but not better than some of this removal. Number 4 goes to Throttle. It's slow and it doesn't deal with some things. It's a great card, but It's not unconditional. Number 3 goes to Bitter Revelation. It's a very powerful effect, but it's a little slow in sorcery speed. Number 2 goes to Right. Right of the Serpent is unconditional removal, but it's pretty slow at 6 mana. And Disowned Ancestor shuts down every single aggressive deck in this format while being great in the late game. So I'm giving Disowned Ancestor the #1 slot for the black common. Alright, let's see how well I did. I'm curious. Okay. Okay, flip the list and put Debilitating Injury on. That's pretty much what I'm reading. Scavenger is the best black common. You know, he might be right. I think about it more and more, and yeah. I know that's a very big change, but you know what? I agree with his logic. He put Disowned Ancestor as number 4 instead of number 2. The nature of the decks I run, I think Ancestor is going to be amazing. He put Debilitating Injury and Right over it. I think Ancestor is a better card than those two. It's also very good against those two. I'm keeping my number 2. Number 3, Right of the Serpent. Something I should note is he put Debilitating Injury as a more powerful card, and Throttle didn't make the list. With Morph in the format, I can't help but think about this more. Normally Throttle would be a more powerful card, but if you have Right of the Serpents in your deck, that can get a little awkward. And Morph. I think it's very important to have answers to bombs, so I'm putting Right at 3, Debilitating Injury at 4, and Bitter Revelation at 5. So that's my list. Black's going to be pretty sweet going into this set. White's also going to be pretty sweet. Blue's been looking pretty great too. I hope you enjoyed watching. I did give up a lot of ground to Luis in this video, but that said, hard to argue with good logic. So I hope you enjoyed the video and have a great day. Oh, this one.